Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the dramatic and, well, usually violent ends of 6 major historical figures. But we're not just looking at how they died. We're going to explore exactly how their demises fundamentally shaped the course of history. It's a really fascinating look at just how fragile power actually is, and I literally cannot wait to walk you through it all.
So here's our game plan. We're moving strictly chronologically through over 2 millennia of history. We'll start with the Ides of March, move on to the Praetorian Plot, check out the Siberian Mystic, look at plots against the Führer, the execution in Dongo, and finally wrap up with Operation Neptune Spear. All right, Section 1, the Ides of March, the fall of the Roman dictator.
Let's jump right into our first event, the infamous assassination of Roman dictator Julius Caesar on March 15th, 44 BC. Now, to really grasp this, we have to look at the why. Caesar had basically gathered up immense, lifelong political authority for himself, including a perpetual dictatorship, and this absolutely terrified the political elite. So a group of about 60 senators, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, decided they had to strike. They ambushed Caesar at a scheduled Senate meeting at the Curia of Pompey, and he sustained approximately 23 stab wounds. To these conspirators, this wasn't just cold-blooded murder. In their minds, they were pulling off a desperate, preemptive defense of the Roman Republic and its ancient traditions.
And they were incredibly proud of it. That pride is brilliantly captured on a silver coin minted by Brutus himself. It boldly shows off 2 daggers right alongside the words Ides Mar, standing for the Ides of March. But here is the massive catch and why this matters so much. The assassination totally failed to restore the Republic. Instead, it lit the match for a massive civil war between Caesar's supporters and the conspirators. Ultimately, that conflict led to the absolute collapse of the Republic and birthed the Roman Empire under Augustus.
Moving on to Section 2, the Praetorian Plot, Death in the Palace.
So, let's jump ahead a few decades to 41 AD and look at the bloody end of Emperor Caligula. Caligula had spent his reign working tirelessly to grab unconstrained personal power, usually right at the expense of the Senate. But surprisingly, his downfall was sparked by something incredibly petty. Caligula had a habit of mocking a Praetorian tribune named Cassius Chaerea. He'd assign him feminine watchwords, things like Priapus or Venus, just to make fun of Chaerea's supposedly high, squeaky voice. Honestly, it was a terrible mistake. It sparked a deeply personal resentment, turning a once loyal guard into a highly lethal enemy.
Now, there's a massive disconnect here between what they planned and what actually happened. Chaerea and his fellow conspirators did succeed. They cornered and stabbed Caligula in a narrow palace corridor. And some of those guys truly believed this was their golden ticket to bring back aristocratic privileges and restore the Roman Republic. But the reality? Well, the Praetorian Guard instantly shut that down. They spontaneously decided to crown Caligula's uncle, Claudius, as the next emperor instead. Just like that, the empire rolled on.
Okay, so we've seen how empires are basically born from the deaths of emperors. But if we jump all the way forward to the 20th century, we have to ask a totally different question. How on earth does an empire's collapse begin with a single, wandering peasant?
That brings us to Section 3, the Siberian Mystic, the assassination of Rasputin.
We are talking, of course, about Grigory Rasputin. He was this deeply divisive faith healer from Siberia, and his rise is just absolutely stunning. Born in 1869 in a tiny village, he somehow captivated Russian high society. By 1906, he had secured a gig as the faith healer for the Tsar's only son, Alexei, who had hemophilia. Rasputin totally leveraged this highly intimate role to grab immense political power. His influence hit its peak around 1915. When Tsar Nicholas left the capital to oversee the army during World War I, Rasputin and the Empress were basically left running the entire empire.
But here's the crucial point. Rasputin was widely viewed as a complete charlatan by the Russian elite. His scandalous and frankly sinister reputation was severely discrediting the Tsarist government. By late 1916, a group of conservative noblemen decided they had to act to save the monarchy's image, so they assassinated him. But, spoiler alert, it was way too late. His immense unpopularity had already done the damage, directly precipitating the total overthrow of the House of Romanov shortly after his death.
Up next, Section 4, Plots Against the Führer, the Failed Assassinations.
As we roll right into the chaos of the Second World War, we see the absolute extremes of targeted assassination. Did you know historians have uncovered at least 42 distinct plots against Adolf Hitler? It's wild. But what is truly staggering is how many of these failed just because of sheer blind luck.
In 1939, a carpenter named George Elser planted a time bomb in a Munich beer hall, but Hitler just unexpectedly cut his speech short and left early. Then, in 1943, a conspirator smuggled a bomb disguised as liqueur bottles onto Hitler's plane, but the detonators literally froze in the unheated cargo hold. Later that same year, Rudolf von Gersdorff strapped on a suicide vest for a museum tour with Hitler, but Hitler wildly rushed through the whole exhibit in under 10 minutes, meaning Gersdorff had to run and secretly defuse his own bomb in a public bathroom at the last second. You can't make this stuff up.
Even the most famous attempt, the July 20, 1944 plot at the Wolf's Lair, orchestrated by Klaus von Stauffenberg, failed over mere inches. The explosive was hidden in a briefcase, but because someone shifted it behind a heavy, thick oak table leg right before the blast, the explosion was completely deflected. Hitler walked away with only minor injuries.
Section 5. Execution in Dongo. The end of Mussolini.
So while Hitler somehow kept surviving his assassins, his closest ally absolutely did not. By the spring of 1945, the Axis powers were rapidly collapsing everywhere. Benito Mussolini was reduced to leading a German puppet state up in northern Italy. As the Allies broke through the final defenses and local partisans started rising up in the cities, Mussolini's position became completely hopeless. On April 25th, he fled Milan, trying to make a run for the Swiss border. But just 2 days later, local partisans captured him and his mistress, Clara Petacci, near the village of Dongo on Lake Como. The very next afternoon, both were executed.
The aftermath of this was incredibly brutal. Their bodies were taken to Milan's Piazzale Loreto. By 9 a.m., a furious crowd had formed, and they started pelting the corpses with vegetable, beating them, and even shooting at them. An American eyewitness arriving with Allied forces described the crowd as, quote, sinister, depraved, out of control. Eventually, they hoisted the bodies up and hung them upside down from the metal girders of a half-built gas station. The people who hung them claimed it was just to protect the bodies from the crushing mob. But let's be real, hanging someone upside down was a traditional, medieval method in northern Italy used specifically to stress the absolute infamy of the person being hanged.
And finally, Section 6. Operation Neptune Spear, the modern manhunt.
All right, let's bring this right into the 21st century. On May 2, 2011, a massive 10-year international manhunt violently culminated in Operation Neptune Spear, which was given the green light by U.S. President Barack Obama. The target, Osama bin Laden, the founder of al-Qaeda. They finally tracked him to a compound known as the Waziristan Haveli in Abbottabad, Pakistan. This was a highly coordinated mission. It brought together top-tier military and intelligence units, including SEAL Team 6, the 16th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and the CIA's Special Activities Division.
It really shows you how the logistics of eliminating a target have evolved. The operation launched from Jalalabad, Afghanistan, about 120 miles away, using Black Hawk helicopters. The entire raid on the compound took just 40 minutes. Bin Laden was killed, and despite one of the helicopters actually crashing during the insertion, the operatives pulled off a rapid extraction and brought his body back to Afghanistan.
Now, you might be wondering, what on earth happened to the remains? Well, the historical records note that they flew the body over 850 miles to the Arabian Sea. Bin Laden was buried at sea. This was a very deliberate decision, designed to balance practical logistics with some deeply complex geopolitical and religious sensitivities, essentially ensuring that no physical shrine could ever be created for him.
Looking back at all this, it's absolutely fascinating to see how the methods of removing powerful figures have changed over time. We started with close-quarters betrayal by supposed friends wielding daggers on a Senate floor, and we end up with highly sophisticated cross-border military strikes utilizing stealth helicopters. A real shift in tactics, right? But what you really need to take away from this is the common thread running through over 2 millennia of history. Whether it's the Ides of March, a narrow Roman palace corridor, or a heavily fortified compound in Abbottabad, these events prove one thing for sure. Holding concentrated power constantly carries the very real risk of a sudden, violent end.
Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on. Does the violent removal of a leader ever truly solve the problems they created? Or, as we clearly saw with figures like Caesar and Rasputin, does eliminating a powerful person merely set the stage for an entirely new, often much bloodier era of conflict? History strongly suggests the echo of these demises rarely fades quietly. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history that shapes our world today.